everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Paola, and today I have Francisco here with me. So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about On the Hook?
Sure. My name is Francisco Stork, and my latest novel is called On the Hook. It's the ninth novel that I've written, and it's a story of a young man. He's a sophomore in high school, and his name is Hector. Hector is very smart. He is, captain of his chess team. He's on his way to trying to be an engineer. And the only thing that kind of holding him back is that he lives in a place on subsidized housing. After his father died, they had to move into the kind of the projects in El Paso, Texas. And for him, it's a kind of a dangerous place, and he has to kind of stay under the radar and not get noticed, not let people know that he's smart, because that kind of gets him, draws attention to himself. But unfortunately, despite all his efforts, the brother of the kind of the local drug dealer notices him and targets him. Hector has to deal with his really kind of burning desire for revenge, and either give into it or find a way to live.
What were some themes that you knew you wanted to explore, and which ones kind of snuck up on you as you revised?
Yeah, that's a good question, because one thing is what you intend to write, and another thing is what happens when you're actually writing. And I think that I always wanted to deal with images of masculinity that Latino kids get, boys get as they're growing up, and what it is to be a man in the eyes of men in your family, the people you hang around with, and the notions of courage, what it means to be courageous, and also about sort of the feelings that arise when you're not able to meet those kind of standards, the sense of fear and the sense of being a coward that you have to kind of live with when you're not kind of measuring up to what you're expected to be as a man. I think what snuck up with me, the kind of the hatred that kind of developed in Hector, and kind of a almost to the point of being kind of an obsession, and then trying to figure out, well, how does one get rid of that kind of hatred?
Yeah, that's a powerful thing to say, and it's just very true. Being angry can become like a grudge. So I'm glad that you got to explore it, even if you didn't intend to.
Yeah, no, that's I hope I did justice to it. I mean,
I think you did it justice. I think you did it
thank you.
justice. So this is the fill in the blanks section. The first book I loved was
The first book was called the Prince and the Pauper, and it was written by Mark Twain, and I think I read it when I was like 7 years old.
the first book I bought with my own money was
I was trying to think of, I'm trying to think about that, because I mean, it's been a while. When you interview 18 years olds or 20-year-olds, they have an easier way to answer. I think I remember buying, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne.
Oh.
And it was like almost like the first science fiction, one of the first science fiction novels. I still remember the cover, this giant squid enveloping this little tiny submarine with like its 6 or 8 arms. So that was my first, that was probably the first book that I bought. I used to buy a lot of comic books when I was a kid, like I was every day, every Sunday after church, I would get 1 peso in Mexico, and I would get to buy one comic book. Then the guy, outside of church, he would have his spread of comic books on the sidewalk, and I usually bought these books that were, I don't know if they make them anymore. They're called Classics Illustrated, so they would be like remakings of Don Quixote, for example, but in comic book form. So I had a great collection of that by the time I was in my teens.
I love that. My first book idea was
First book idea, let's see, I think I was in my 40s. I mean, the first kind of idea where I really kind of went through and tried to complete it, was a story of somebody who was on death row. There's a person who was working in a prestigious law firm and have a beautiful life in the suburbs with his wife, and things kind of start falling apart, and he ends up going back to Texas to look for his long lost love, and he ends up on death row. And while he's in death row, he's told that he has to write every day. So that was the book, is that, like the 2 hours of writing that he did. And it's a story of his life, and, how he ended up in that situation. It wasn't that, just a little bit autobiographical, but not that much.
I love that. That sounds so interesting. The song that reminds
Yeah,
me the
that
most of my book is.
I was thinking about that. I think that I used to listen to my granddaughter liked this Frozen, and so I like the song "Let It Go," but it has some great lines, that kind of like that fit Hector. There's this anger that gives him a sense of freedom, not having to comply with rules anymore, and not having to be a good boy anymore, or a good person. He's just kind of like he believes that that's freedom, and I think that a lot of us are under the illusion that kind of just letting it go, and not having to conform to any kind of expectations or any kind of responsibility, that's freedom. And it takes a while to figure out that that's not quite what freedom is for.
I love that. That's a great song. If you were a book, what section of the bookstore would you live in?
This I would like to be in one of those bins in the middle of the store that they put out like at the beginning of the summer for like recommended summer reading. And I always notice that like the great fun books always make it there, like the books that are going to be read for forever. And every year there's a couple of new ones that make it in there. I mean, but once you make it into that bin of like recommended summer reading, that's pretty special. That's pretty special because that means that teachers and librarians think that your book is both fun, to be read in the summer, but also important to be read. So that's where I like to be.
I love that. And that is so true. All the great books end up in that section. Who did you write On the Hook for?
When I was writing it, I imagined a young man who was kind of like angry, who wasn't a very enthusiastic reading, really, would rather be doing something else than reading. So I gave myself the challenge of writing a book that would be interesting and meaningful for that type of young man. So I wanted to grab his attention and keep it, but also hopefully for him to see himself, reflected in Hector.
I love that answer. And I think it's very underestimated how important representation is. Because I know right now it's been kind of watered down to a marketing strategy or to a marketing trend. But it's a really deep and meaningful experience to read
Yeah.
an experience like yours.
Yes. I mean, I like what you said about watering it down. There should be some authenticity and some integrity in doing that. And I think, I think a reader can sort of tell when the author is out there just to make a buck, or when the author is really trying to engage. I often like start reading a book and I can tell whether within a few pages, I can tell whether this is someone I can trust, or someone who's just using me, or is going to hurt me down the line. Sort of like a first date, I guess. Not that I remember that much about what it was, but
I mean, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. Readers know. What's something you'd like your readers to take away from your book?
I mean, I'm always, whenever I write, I think that the most important thing that I would like the readers to leave with is for the character to become real in their lives. So I mean, a lot of times I get like emails or letters, from young people asking me about like what happened after the book. Did they get together? Did they marry? And that's kind of like a big compliment, because that means that the characters have become real enough for them to care about, like, okay, what happens after. But also I think that the idea of seeing that hatred is both hurtful not only to others but to you.
I love that. That's a lot to think about. And I think your book does that really well. Like, to finish, would you like to tell us about your other projects?
Well, I mean, I think I have one more book that I think will come out in maybe late 2021. It's a story of a Mexican American boy. Like, actually, this boy is undocumented, and he makes his way to Brooklyn with his sister, and he falls in love with a young girl from Brooklyn. So it's really my attempt at doing a love story. And they're always love stories have always been scary for me, because I really like, okay, how do I describe, the first kiss and all that stuff. And I'm excited about it. I mean, it'll be my 10th novel. I don't know how many books I'll have after that. So, if it's my last book, I wanna leave on a good note.
I love that. I live for love stories, especially first love stories. It's beautiful, and I'm so excited for your book. So Francisco, thank you so much for doing this with me.
I wanna thank you really for. I think that it is readers like you who have these platforms that I depend on for my books to reach the kind of the young people that can benefit from those books. It's so I'm really grateful for you and to have read the book and to ask me some really important questions that had me thinking. It's always good when the questions make you discover something about your book that you hadn't thought about. So you did that, and so thank you very much.
Thank you. I am honored. So thank you so much for writing On the Hook. Thank you so much for doing this with me. Everyone else watching, don't forget to get on the hook. I will leave the links down below. Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much.
much, Paola.
No, thank you. If you haven't already and you'd like to, go ahead and hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye bye.